as well as this audience, our web viewers and the Ontario Telehealth Network sites. This seminar is being recorded and is being broadcast over the web. We ask that you hold your questions to after the seminar presentation so that we can get a microphone to you. And for our virtual viewers, please send in your questions and we will ask them for you. These seminars are hosted by the Waterloo Institute for Health Informatics Research, the Lawson Health Research Institute, and the National Institutes for Health Informatics. We're also very grateful to our seminar sponsors, Healthcare Information Management and Communications Canada, McKesson Information Solutions, and ITAC Health. We could not host these seminars without their support. I have two announcements today for you. Our next Smarter Health seminar will be on Friday. We don't usually hold them on Friday, but Friday, October the 30th, just before Halloween. Our guest speaker will be Mr. Bill Tatham, who is CEO and Chairman of NextJ Systems. Many of you will recognize Bill's name as the person who is a well-known entrepreneur in this area and has generously helped us fund and create the new co-op building on campus. He is passionate about improving the healthcare system, and his presentation is entitled Strategy for eHealth Innovation. I believe that there are copies of his seminar announcement at the back of this room, and we'll be sending out that announcement as well electronically shortly. In addition, we hold another research seminar called our Research Seminars, and Dr. Catherine Burns from Systems Design Engineering at the University of Waterloo will be speaking on understanding cognitive work in healthcare. This talk will be next week, Wednesday, October 7th, from 12 to 1 p.m. In this room. So please come and join us for that seminar as well. The Smarter Health Seminars this year has focused on leaders in the area of health informatics and the e-health industry. The schedule for today is as follows. Brantz will speak for about 45 minutes. This will be followed by a facilitated discussion. And as I mentioned, we would welcome your questions after the presentation. So please signal that if you have a question, I will get a microphone to you, and we invite our web and teleconference viewers to please send in their questions as well. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker to you. Mr. Brantz Myers is the Director of Healthcare Business Development for Cisco Canada. I met Brantz a few years ago. He helped us put together the technology that we needed to do these broadcasts for the OTN video conferences and for the webcasts. So we're very grateful for Brantz for that support. He's also been very supportive of other initiatives here at the University of Waterloo and in Waterloo. So it is my pleasure to have him here today as our guest speaker, and in some way, a small way, acknowledge his contributions to us. Brantz is a 21-year veteran of the Canadian information communications technology industry. He joined Cisco in 2000. Prior to his current role at Cisco, Brantz led Cisco's public sector marketing efforts in Canada. Now, as Director of Healthcare Business Development, Brantz identifies, defines, and manages the creation of industry-relevant solutions in the Canadian healthcare market. Prior to Cisco, he worked for Hewlett-Packard, Digital, and Compaq. He earned a Bachelor of Science, Mathematics, and Computer Science from Dalhousie University, and completed a marketing management program from the Schulich School of Business at York University. He also holds various other professional development certificates in a number of disciplines. So without any further ado, please welcome Brantz Myers.
Thank you, Shirley. Good afternoon, people in the room and people out in virtual land. Great to be here in Waterloo, a hotbed of talent. So many great companies and great people have come out of the university, including my wife. Went to the school here. So it's fantastic to come. I always get inspired on these visits to Waterloo. And I always find it smells like blackberries for some reason. Nice place to be. So, we had a chat about health informatics and how it didn't even used to really be a profession, really. It was something that people kind of found themselves into, and I think I'm guilty of that It's great to see that it's now been embraced as a career path that can bring people into healthcare from really any of the disciplines, whether you come from humanities or from technology or from healthcare itself. Health informatics is a fantastic emerging growth opportunity, and I've tried to transform my career. I'm in the process of transforming my career really to be a health informatics professional, and I'm doing it on the job. I'd love to be able to maybe come and do some time here if you have a concise way for me to do that while I'm working. But I think if I were to do it all over again, this would be a fantastic career path to start in. Today what we'll do is explore some of the things that we're seeing as trends. I think at Cisco we're fortunate to find ourselves in the middle of a lot of very interesting problems. As the provider of networks that connect so many different things together, we came from effectively a heritage of being plumbers, and we've had to, I guess in the past, whether we wanted to or not, start to understand why people were applying these networks to their problems and how they were applying them. And so we've really added a lot of fuel to understanding these various industries, and I'm 100% dedicated on healthcare now, and we've taken our first lessons from how people have applied these tools to real-world healthcare problems, and we've gotten behind some of that effort and now are bringing new thinking to it either from other partners or customers that we work with, or in some cases on our own. We've employed a couple of thought leaders in our company from healthcare, and we've really gotten behind this market. So I'm going to take a look at things we've learned and seen as trends, and I think we'll really just go through a reasonably loosely connected exploration of how healthcare is being transformed by technology. The topic is how technology will transform in ways beyond the EHR, and the reason I have that is almost intentionally to get us to think of something other than the EHR. It just seems to be such a topic that I think people believe, or maybe naively believe, and often in politics naively seem to believe that if we were to have one consolidated repository of electronic medical records, all our problems would be solved. I think that would be a nice position to start from, not a nice thing to try and get to. So let's imagine we solve this problem. We'll talk a little bit about that problem, but think beyond that. Once you can get all this information and make these connections, what can you do with it? So I'm going to start by looking at some of the external forces that are going on. There absolutely is a ton of technology available today for us to work with. All sorts of things have kind of converged over the past few years that give us the blocks, the building blocks, the Lego pieces to assemble around a variety of different problems in different industries. But health is a very good target for many of these technologies. Just think back a few years ago about trying to connect any two information resources together. The first problem you'd have is how do we get that video from point A to point B? And these were really big, expensive problems to solve until very recently. Until we actually had a pervasive network called the Internet, these things were done by leased lines, very expensive point-to-point analog connections that unless you had a very good reason with a great source of funding to solve these sort of connection problems, you wouldn't be able to make the connections, which meant that the innovation of things you put on the ends was very limited because there was no scale or no volume. And today, I think what we found is the combination of the Internet and consumer electronics have driven a whole lot of innovation that I'll call consumer-led innovation. That the devices that we carry around on our hips, like BlackBerries, have allowed us to have economies of scale for technologies and informational resources and access to networks that we've never had in the past. And we can start to take advantage of that consumer-led cost model and drive it toward problems that we see in things like healthcare. So you have this access to technology. Now we have all kinds of information. Information comes from everywhere. Whether the first thing people do when they get sick is they go to the web and they look it up, and then they're terrified because they find that almost any symptom you have is going to kill you. I've done it myself, right? You go on the Internet and you're going to find way more than you want to know, and you'll always gravitate toward the really bad ones because they'll seem to come up first, or at least your eyes will catch those. So we have all this information. We have to sort through it intelligently. We also have people that we can now get access to that we couldn't get access to before. So if you do have an illness and you want to talk to an expert about it, you can find that in the form of a web form or in the form of some sort of resource that you couldn't have ever had access to before. The other thing that's changed is the demands that the people have of healthcare. You know, generationally, we have changed, and I have a slide on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The illness burden is changing. A couple of things. We're seeing pandemic response. We're seeing things like SARS and H1N1 come along today and spread a little more quickly than they did before. We're a very close contact society globally. One child who goes to Mexico can come to a province or a state in north of the border, and all of a sudden you can track that pandemic reach across a town, a city, a province. And we can now put better tools in place to react to those sorts of things. We also have this massive challenge, which is the aging population. The baby boom is still nowhere near drawing on the system to the capacity we believe that they will in the coming years. Personalization, whether it's the way that you deal with your healthcare provider and the information you really demand from that healthcare provider, or the idea that you could even work on illnesses through patient-specific remedies, patient-specific treatments, which are starting to come out of genomic research. And then the way that the physicians are able to access information today through the map of medicine is changing everything as well. So healthcare is becoming borderless. Today, if you have an illness and you want to get information about it, you're going to go to wherever that information is. We don't have to stay in the confines of our local community or our province or our country for that matter. The patient's experience is going to drive a lot of this. The patient will go to and direct money, whether it's in our public funded system or in a private system, or if you want to go seek care and it's somewhere else, you'll pay for it. And the payment will be linked to value in public or private health care. We'll find that facts like hospitalization costs, $15,000 per incident in Canada on average. So can you redirect that load, that cost load, away from the system by doing preventative care, moving the system from being proactive instead of reactive, to wellness instead of remedial health care? And we're going to find that things like the U.S. health reform are going to affect the globe. I think whatever they do there is going to impact the technologies. It'll impact the way that other countries interact with the states, because it is such a massive contributor to the world's economy. Now, the great news is that there are fantastic technologies available, new ways of learning. You can mask massive complexity through technologies today. It used to be that having a video conference was a real pain. I'm sure many of you have tried to do this, and you got the phone call working, and you're looking at the video system going, okay, now how do I get the video to work? How do someone moved the video system that was on wheels from one room to another, and all of a sudden, you can't make it work. What's the IP address? Or even back before the IP world, we had ISDN addresses to worry about. And today, we can mask that complexity by making a video call as easy as a phone call. In fact, when you make a phone call, up comes the video if you desire it to as well. Well, let's go back to this. Let's go take a look at this list of priorities and how there's a disconnection between the priorities of IT and the priorities of people in clinical workforce. So there's a huge difference here. Gartner DataQuest did the piece on the left, and then there was some health services research done on the right side that interviewed clinicians. So their top priorities are completely unaligned with the top priorities that health IT professionals were bringing to the market. Now, this is 2006 data. I don't think it's gotten much better from that point. And yet, anyone who studied health informatics has likely heard the axiom that unless you get clinical engagement and adoption early, it's going to fail, whatever you do. So we're seeing the successful implementations of technology come up from clinicians. The creative clinicians many of the either creative or in some cases younger physicians that are coming into the market who are comfortable with technology wonder why they don't have the tools to solve some pretty obvious problems. And they go over to IT and then they say, we need your help to solve some of these interesting challenges. So that's a great opportunity for us to drive innovation from clinical adoption and then have more wide embracement. We really focus on three principal connections. And we do find ourselves in this communication discussion a lot. So we're thinking about the connections of people to people, people to information, and then people to resources or items. So some examples would be in the context of a nurse doing his or her job, they need access to the physician to make a decision about patient care. So that would be people to people, but they're also going to interact with some informational resources to make that transaction happen. Ultimately, they're going to have to do some care and deliver perhaps a drug through an infusion pump. The next thing they're going to do is go and try and find an infusion pump, which brings us to one of the huge challenges in healthcare, which is that the people, in my opinion, that really make a hospital tick are the nurses. And they spend something like 20 to 30%, depending on what study you look at, 20 to 30% of their day is spent looking for stuff. How can we help this? I think technology can help this. So if we can make the connection of people to resources and people information more clear, we can help that day happen. Now, generationally, a lot has changed as well. We have people on this chart. Many people from each group are in the system today. So they have different sorts of expectations. As we go back in time, they really wanted information. They just wanted information. They wanted to know what was going on. They weren't very demanding other than, tell me what's going on, what can I expect? And then as we move through to baby boomers and Generation X, we find that people want more personalization. I want to be treated as a person, not a number. I want something that is prescriptive for me. And then ultimately now what we're finding with the new generation, the millennial generation coming in, the millennials really want control. They want to feel like they have their hands on the knobs of their health. I think financial services are somewhere around 10 years ahead of healthcare from a consumer engagement perspective. And if you think of what you can do with your banking on the internet or stock trading on the internet, you have a lot of hands on these knobs. 10, 15 years ago, we had to deal with brokers who kind of had this wall between you and the real information, and there were transaction fees every time you moved. Today, the fees have almost vanished, and the control has gone way up. That's the state of financial services today, and I believe that that's the state that we want to see healthcare in the future, and that'll be demanded by the millennials as they come through the system. So there have been lots of innovations, and I'm going to try and go through some of these. Let's just take a look at a list of them. Telemedicine has been around for a long time. We happen to be in a province that has embraced telemedicine long and far and wide. With the Ontario Telemedicine Network, we have the most advanced and largest telemedicine network in the world. And yet it is still only reaching to 600 endpoints, which really are hospitals and nursing stations and clinics. There's an endpoint in here. I saw at Shirley's office there's an OTN endpoint in here. So, and we're on OTN right now, I believe. So OTN has been a great success story, but in their opinion, Dr. Ed Brown, who drives OTN, they've got a long way to go. They really want to move to the consumer. They want to get into the home. They can't address chronic disease management where they are today. So telemedicine is going to come a long way. Web 2 and 3.0, where you engage people, have them give feedback to the system, whether that's patient to patient or patient to clinician or even patient to the payer, the administration is getting richer. Experts on demand, that in some cases is being delivered today by networks like the Ontario Telemedicine Network, but people want more of it and they want it in other places. That's why OTN keeps getting called into other systems, countries, states, provinces who want to replicate some of the work they've done. Virtualized assets are emerging, and these are things like, and I'm going to go through some of these examples, but the map of medicine is an example of that. The smart healthcare facility is a name that we call a hospital that's woven a cohesive network into every element that participates in a patient's care, an administrator or a clinician in their daily lives. And we'll go through that a little bit as well. And consumer healthcare, we've talked about a little bit, and that's going to continue. So let's look at Web 2 and 3 for a moment. It was challenging to track things like pandemics without Web 2 technology. Here's an example of a map of Canada where an outbreak has been mapped. And you could do this over time. We could run a time-based spread of something like H1N1 or SARS. Interesting how we can heuristically derive some of these maps. Whether it is fact-based, that someone's actually expressed and been tested for an illness, or whether it's anecdotal, like tying it to the POS system, the retail cash register system of drugstores. So if you tie into the retail cash register system of drugstores and you look for, let's say, cough and cold medications that are sold, you can see some pretty amazing trends. As a cold comes through or flu season comes through, you can actually watch how right across the country the rates will go up. And you can actually alarm a pandemic based on this almost anecdotal or secondary information. However, it's prone to false alerts. What happens if Shoppers Drug Mart or IDA has a sale on cough medicine that week, right? You might want to go stock up. Or maybe they have a child, toothache medication. And all of a sudden it looks like all the kids in Canada got toothaches at the same time. Isn't that weird? So you have to look under the meaning, look for meaning behind this data. But certainly the tools are there. Many of the tools are freely available. You can use tools like Google Maps. You can use Microsoft's offerings through Bing to get spatially related data, feed it with your own data sources, tie it into external sources, and really build new applications centered around this idea. So access to experts on demand is also changing. The map of medicine, which is a very powerful tool, can help guide physicians through diagnostics, because diagnostics are very challenging. It's sometimes it takes weeks or months to diagnose a patient, and sometimes it still isn't correct. So trying to weed through especially rare illnesses through tools like the map of medicine, which is really an expert system, which because of the web and the pervasive nature of networks today can be delivered right down to your hand wherever you are, is a powerful asset for us to think about. Putting technologies in the hands of patients is powerful too. The idea of this growing body of chronic disease, type 2 diabetes is a really big one, big obvious one, is a challenge. So if we look at some of the new tools like glucose meters, well, glucose meters, you didn't even have inexpensive portable glucose meters until a few years ago. So it was really important that we got the glucose number easily in the hands of the patient, because the most important person that can take control and immediate action on their health is the patient. So you get this reading, and you could eat, or you could take some insulin. You can take some action for yourself. But at the same time, type 2 diabetes patients are especially tough patients, because the disease comes on slowly, and they don't really know they're sick until they're fairly sick. And once they are sick, there's no real big downside to treating their bodies well. Whereas in type 1, if you don't manage your disease, you'll die. Okay? So those people either leave the system very quickly or become really good patients, hopefully the latter. Type 2 creates a lot of challenges for the patient, creates a lot of load on the system, and a lot of extra cost and wellness challenges. You have all sorts of things like plaque starts building up on your coronary arteries with type 2. You start to get ulcers on your limbs. You don't know why necessarily. And that was lunch conversation. That was a good lunch conversation. And we can now start to help these people. So you have the handheld glucose meter. How about putting a Bluetooth interface in that and then binding it out to the wide area through a secure application on your HIP-based Wi-Fi phone, not Wi-Fi, standard phone, standard mobile telephone that has a secure application that can take the data from the Bluetooth-enabled glucose meter and pass it back to an electronic medical record, and then apply some heuristics against that electronic medical record to start to look for patients that are on an undesirable trend. And we can now flag those patients. Now here's the part that's real. We can do that today, and there are trials going on in Canada doing what I just said. Now I'll give you the imaginary part. Imagine if you could take those patients that are on a bad trend, you could text them, email them, or call them and say, tonight, channel 80 on your television set, you're going to have a live bidirectional video chat with a nurse practitioner and a dietitian, because we don't like the trend that your blood sugar and your weight have been on for the past 3 months. We want to get you back on track. And if you can intervene like that, you could probably materially dent that load that's being hospitalized, generating a $15,000 cost per hospitalization. You might think applying bidirectional home video secure telemedical chats to the home would be cost prohibitive until you take the $15,000 per hospitalization and multiply that by the millions of patients in the system with chronic disease. And all of a sudden, that little added application to your set-top box starts to look like it could be a reality. These are some of the things that we're thinking about and working on. That, of course, complements the existing and robust institution-based telemedicine networks, which now need to be enhanced as well. I recently had one of the thought leaders, and both academically and clinically, in telepsychiatry come into our office, and we use some high-definition video conferencing technologies to just try a little experiment out where he psychoanalyzed me, and he hasn't recovered since. But he said that there was a huge difference just between using low standard traditional standard definition video, which is what they use today, and using high definition video where they can get all of the nonverbal communication. And I think that's not an obvious thing. Right? I mean, we all know it looks better, right? I mean, you watch sports on high def and it looks better. It seems to be a luxury. But what I hear from the telepsychiatry experts is that they really can't have a meaningful telepsychiatry session without that quality that brings them the nonverbal communication. So this is where I think the existing institution-based telemedicine networks can grow up while they also grow down into the consumer's home, delivering telemedicine to people wherever they are. If they want to live in a small community, they should still be able to get equal access to health. Let's just take a walk through a hospital for a moment. In a hospital where you've taken these informational resources and exposed them to clinicians, administrators, and patients, you can do a few things. You can have a doctor who can get immediate access to things like lab values around a patient. They should be able to be pushed to the doctor's portable phone or computer. It really shouldn't matter what device it is. It should be locationless, and it should be based on the rules around their job. Are they working? Are they on call? Are they in the office? Are they in the OR? Are they home? Are they on vacation? The notion of find me, follow me, and hide me comes into play. Right? In business, we've only ever talked about find me, follow me, but the reality is you need to hide sometimes. You need downtime. We have vacations. So what if you are on vacation? Who's doing your job? Who's taking your workload? The network should know this. We should be able to put this as a resource, as a service that exposes this value up, clinical value, as we run into the daily operation of a hospital. People on the floor should be able to get alarms and notifications. That infusion pump has just run out of drug. Go change it. Where's the infusion pump? Well, you can locate the people, you can locate the resources using very basic technologies I have in my pocket. These are These are active Wi-Fi tags, which can be triangulated on by the very same Wi-Fi wireless network in a hospital, and we can locate these down to 3 meters. So if you can locate these down to 3 meters and attach them to things like infusion pumps, crash carts, wheelchairs, and patients, and possibly caregivers, this would be a caregiver unit where you have a button on it. So you could have a different protocol, like I need a porter. Porter could then be found because we also have a location tracker on the porter. You can bring the nearest porter to get the nearest infusion pump and bring it to the patient with the nurse in that room to provide care in a far more efficient way. How do you measure that? Well, in private health care, you'd probably look at how many fewer people you'd need to do the job. Okay? You might think we can make our workforce more effective, we can make more profit. In public health care, which is most of the world, of course, we would look at how many footsteps per nurse per shift can we save? How much more effective can we make the nurse's day? And can we materially impact that 20 to 30% of the day that they spend looking for stuff? These alarms and notifications can be prioritized. You can build a set of business rules around them or clinical rules around them and get the right notification to the right people at the right time. And tie in resources, whether they're in hospital, in system, in region, in province, or if you have to go outside of that, you should be able to find the kind of person you need or expert you need anywhere in the world and be able to track those assets, locate the right people, and get the right people to the right information at the right place at the right time. I'm going to look at another example, clinical example of the most advanced technology in healthcare, really, for a long time, entirely immersed in quantum physics, is radiology, right? They've also been encumbered by silver halide and acetate analog films forever. So you have, accelerators and, X-ray and gamma ray emitting cyclotrons and X-ray machines, and you got film. That was the extent of that world. Along came the PACS machine and the ability to do filmless radiology, and now all of a sudden we have a great new tool set. Unfortunately, these tools were applied to the system by the technology people, by the IT people. And they didn't do enough of a job around change management initially. Didn't soften the blow to the clinical experts who had been doing radiology the same way for years, using all those great, neat physics tools, but still bound to film and paper. And we saw in the system many expert radiologists take early retirement when the PACS system started to roll out, because they thought, you know what, I don't want to learn a new tool. I have a hanging protocol. I know how to do my job. I'm great with the tools I have. I don't want to learn some new tool. Ironically, another product of quantum physics is this PACS system. Fortunately, we've seen two things happen. Radiologists that have seen the value of these and hung on a little bit realize it does make their job easier. And then secondly, we've got better systems in place. They work better, and they can provide real value to their daily operations. So if you look at what a modern integration of not only radiology, but I'll call it unified communications tools can bring to bear on the day of a radiologist, you can have the notion of presence, which is the notion of instant messaging, like you'd have from your consumer instant messaging service, which I live on. I think instant messaging is a great complement to a phone call. I'll ping someone and I'll say, is it a good time to call? They'll say, no, call me in 10 minutes, and then it'll be a good time. So you wait 10 minutes, you call them then, and you have a much better phone call than you would have had you just called out of the blue. Or if I send someone an urgent email, I might, but with a big attachment in it, I mean, still instant message them and say, I just sent you that email, and then they know. I mean, we all use this stuff, right? Well, those tools can bring a lot of collaborative value to a radiologist who spends a lot of time doing consults with other specialists. So you have a radiologist who wants to run something by an endocrinologist or someone. They would look down the list by skills for the person whose little presence indicator is green, and they have the skill that they want, and they ping them. They say, do you mind taking a look at an image for a minute? Sure. So then we can now engage them. So they can then take their contact study list and ultimately share that out. So some of the other things we can do is have single sign-on. The phone is integrated with the radiology workstation. Send that instant message. Do the shared picture consult, shared whiteboarding. Have the remote person come in and do some measurements or markups on the PACS. And ultimately, you might want to leave a voicemail back to the referring physician. So why not integrate voicemail with the radiology system? This is a real system that you can buy today on the market, and it ties together the two previously separate worlds of communications from the business world, phone, voice, email, with the also previously film-based world of radiology that exists today. I did say that I'd speak a little bit about electronic health records and what can be done to help that challenge. And I'll go back to the comment about clinical adoption. Where people have applied EMRs or EHRs and they have had good clinical uptake, the last thing you want to do is take that away. If they're already using it, you want to be able to leave it in place. Now, the odds on you having a hospital that has the same EMR as the lab in the same town or city are pretty low. And they need to move data back and forth all the time. Or if you go to a primary care office where you might have 5 or 6 doctors and they might have a little electronic medical record for the patients, and they need to share data with the local hospital and the local lab, we'd likely have a third thing here that can't communicate. Even if they're HL7-based, standards-based systems, the way that people have applied these tools had so much wiggle room that they can't really talk to each other. So we worked with a Waterloo company, actually, named Caros Health, to work up a system that we call a medical data exchange solution. And we embed this right into the network so that people can leave the tools they've had in place in their hospital or their clinic or their lab, and they can let the network make the connections for them using the IHE standard to make the mappings in a way that takes the notion of publish and share and discover and present. So publish, discover, present. And those, I believe that's a very powerful notion where we don't have to apply new tools to the job. We don't have to train anyone on how to use a new EMR. You don't have to build a big consolidated single repository. You leave the data out where it is, which mitigates a lot of privacy issues and regulatory compliance issues. But you can gather and expose the view that you need at the time using rules to the people that need it. And probably the coolest part is, if that isn't neat enough, I think it's valuable, is it federates so that you could take a region and have lab, primary care, and hospital consolidate them with a local area exchange solution, and then do the same thing for the neighboring town and then federate those above. So ultimately you can consolidate and share access to electronic medical records in a way that's previously been very challenging. This takes an approach that's kind of subtle. It's buried in the network. And I said we find ourselves in interesting positions being engaged on these network projects, and sometimes there's some pretty elegant solutions that come to bear on them. This will also do radiology, so you can move radiology systems around. Now I'm going to switch gears completely and talk about something that we think is vitally important that rarely gets talked about, which is the actual hospital building itself. The building. If you look at the building today typically will have 3 primary utilities: gas, electricity, and water. And that's been the way it's been. That's the way it still is. That's the way new hospitals are being built. Many of the provincial building agencies have kind of a cookie-cutter approach to a small, medium, and large hospital, and they'll build a design, and you can have any kind you want as long as it's one of those three, and it fits your markets. It's really one. What we've seen is that in every case, they'll build a hospital the old way, and then come in and put in information systems later as an afterthought, because it's only ever been thought of as, oh yeah, you need a network with that too. So they'll come in and they'll then bore holes, coring, x-raying floors, and pulling network wire to connect these systems that, guess what? They're going to go in every single hospital. You're going to do it. It's not like, oh, why don't we put a network in? No, it's going to happen. So build it in as an information utility up front, and do it with the awareness of the other building systems. So if we look at how the internet came about, it was because in the old days, computers couldn't talk to each other. You had a vendor like IBM couldn't talk to a vendor like Hewlett-Packard, who couldn't talk to a vendor like Digital Equipment Corporation. So the internet protocol became the mediation layer that everyone eventually went to. That was true for computers, and it's been true over the past 25 years that these things have all kind of moved over to the internet protocol. It wasn't that long ago that wasn't true. Novell, Banyan, Vines, those are names that aren't that long ago that were very big and omnipresent. What we're seeing now is that the not-so-usual suspects are moving to the same network protocol, which are building automation systems, heating, cooling, fire, life, safety. These are moving to the network as well. And if you put the idea that the network-enabled building systems should be on the same physical network, maybe not the same virtual network, but the same physical network, so that if you have appropriate authentication credentials, you can get access to these other parts, you should be able to tie these systems together and do more with them than you could have done in the past. So if you do that, and you now have lighting and heating and cooling and fire suppression and video surveillance all on the same network, you can build a scenario that we call a smart healthcare facility that can then start to bring some clinical value. Here's a little use case. A lady comes in with needing a C-section, and these are unexpected events, so you can't really plan for them. You might have a room that's been sort of offline, hasn't been used as an OR for a day, and it's HVAC is turned off, the systems in the room are turned off. But this patient comes in, goes through triage, time for a C-section. We then start to tie in the systems in the building. Why not get an elevator ready for that person and waiting? The nurse or porter takes the patient to that waiting elevator, gets them into the room, and while they're on their way to the room has been provisioned to support the procedure. Turning on the right lighting, the right cooling, the right network resources, bringing up the electronic health record and other clinical information systems, and maybe some diagnostic radiology like recent ultrasounds, can all be fired up in that room and ready to go when that patient gets there. There's no reason not to do this. You have all this information. All we're doing is we're suggesting tie in this previously separate thing called the physical systems of the building and allow them to bring value to the patient, the clinicians, and the administrators. If you apply this to a hospital, I'll just go through a more generalized view of this. You can improve the whole patient experience. From the minute they walk in the door, they should be able to see a welcome screen that can accommodate them in their native language. We're fortunate in Canada to have lots of people that don't speak English as a primary language, lots of new Canadians that can come in and they'll have some sort of emergency health condition and they won't necessarily be able to describe it. So if you go into the hospital and you find a welcome screen with 50 languages written in their native script so that you can find the one that you can read and touch it, and then up comes somewhere in the world an interpreter who can then talk to you, find out what kind of symptoms you're expressing, help you connect your challenge, your patient problem, to the clinical people who are doing triage in the hospital. So we can do this remote translation service and get the patient onto a workflow that's going to help them. That interpreter doesn't need to stay up the whole time. They can basically have a chat with the clinical people and tell the patient what's going to happen to them. The patient now knows that they're being treated. They don't have to be able to speak to the local caregiver too much as once they're on the right track. But we need to get them on the right track. And so that's welcoming you into the hospital. Now, once you're in your hospital room, how could a smart healthcare facility help? There are all sorts of things you can do in the room that can help. This is interesting. You know, every device now is getting smart, it seems. And my kids have little toys that I only dreamed about when I was a kid. Everything's got a little bit of intelligence in it. So we're starting to see this consumer-led, low-cost innovation of access to compute cycles and networks make its way into things like lavatory devices. You can have sensors in the hand soap, hand sanitizer, paper towel, toilet paper dispenser. These sorts of things that you find in the lavatory can each now change the way we service a room. Because in the past, and this is true in hotels too, in hotels, almost hotel, hospital, there are parts of it that are very similar. People push carts around full of fluids and paper towels and other things that they're replenishing rooms with. And that's kind of a polling model. Why don't we flip it over, to use a computer term, and turn it into an interrupt-driven model that says when the soap dispenser gets low, it's going to interrupt you and say, hey, I'm low over here. I'm good for another day. Come and top me up. So then now the person pushing the cart around can go to the right rooms at the right time and fill them up. So this does a whole lot. It makes those people far more productive. It also means you probably don't need as many carts or closets full of soap and hand sanitizer and toilet paper, because you're able to have fewer carts that can service a larger area. You don't need the space. When we're constrained by square footage and cost per square foot and heating and cooling, why not take that space and either not use it, not even build it, or apply it to more patient rooms? As the patient load is growing and we're repurposing older hospitals, if you think about the design implications of putting information in the hands of the right people at the right time, a lot of things can free up space. Not only those storage closets, but how about the whole notion of a nursing station? Why do we have nursing stations? It's because the stuff's there. Like, if we go back to when they built them, the paper files were there. And then when the paper started to go away, the big CRT was there. A little better, but still you're physically bound to that nursing station's location. Well, now, why are you going to the nursing station? I mean, if you can put patient monitoring out on the hip of the caregiver, and if you can put nurse call out to the clinician, if you can put communications with experts and other doctors and clinicians out to the caregiver, why do we have a nursing station? It's a good question. We're starting to see in new hospital builds that they're reducing the number of nursing stations. Not necessarily eliminating. I think they may just go away. It may be in a few years they may just go away. But you can definitely reduce them. So music to the room, scented air. These things don't sound necessarily meaningful, but there are fact-based studies that say that wellness and hospitalization comfort and time in hospital can be improved and reduced by making a pleasant environment. And these things can all be controlled by the network. RFID asset management, that's back to these location-based services again. And signage. The signs can participate in the building now by showing useful information like a map. But imagine you have a fire alarm that goes off. Now we can take the map and show people the nearest fire exit on the fly. Or if you have something maybe a little more grim, like a code pink protocol, which is a baby abduction, we could tie the RFID tag location awareness, which is on the ankle of the baby, to the network, and you could put a rule in place that says after 11 p.m. that baby shouldn't be leaving the prenatal ward or the baby ward. And if they do, and if they go through an exit to the hospital, and we locate that activity through a choke point, an RFID choke point, we could grab video on the same network with video cameras that are on that IP network and push an alert to the security people with a picture of who has the baby going out the door to the hip-based phones or the desktop phones of the security people. So that now these things that used to all be there, we had video cameras, we had phones, we had security guards, you had babies, and you had baby abductions. These things all come together and form a far more intelligent response to the scenario. Code White's another protocol. This is for a dangerous patient. You see this a lot in psych wards. You have a patient. Often the patients are most dangerous with certain caregivers, like they'll have a thing with somebody in the hospital. So you start to know who these conflicts exist between, and you can put a rule in place that says if that patient and that caregiver come within 100 meters of each other because of these, we can page the caregiver and say, you know who is only 100 meters away. You might want to get off the floor or keep your eyes open. And that's the reality. And if you do get an encounter, you could push the button on the RFID tag, which not only knows where you are, but can send a signal for help for a Code White protocol. So once you have these things linked together in a room, you can start to expose them as patient services. So that a patient who traditionally would have a patient bedside device, which would have been a TV set and maybe a phone, can now have a comprehensive bedside patient terminal, which can do much more. TV can be complemented with on-demand television, not only for entertainment, but for things like preoperative, prescriptive e-learning content. No surgeon has enough time to answer all the questions of a patient who's going to have surgery. Generally, anyone who's had surgery, especially if they've been well their whole lives and now they need a bypass, they're going to have a lot of questions for that cardiac surgeon, to take that example. So most of them are going to be the same sorts of questions from patient to patient. Why not build a little 10 to 15 minute e-learning video module that'll take the patient through all of the usual frequently asked questions, and then the surgeon can have a far more meaningful 5-minute chat with that patient then, to ask the few things that they still wonder about. After they've had their procedure, you could have a post-operative video module that says how to get well quickly and get out of the hospital quickly, which both the patient and the hospital want. Okay. We could adjust the heating, the cooling, the lighting from the patient bedside. A clinician could securely log in using a smart card and perhaps a biometric thumb swipe and get access to an electronic medical record. Could do a physician order entry. Could do a nutritional entry, dietary entry on this bedside device. There could be a revenue stream for billable minutes so that the people could call long distance. And hospitals are always trying to find other sources of revenue. So video on demand, long distance telephone, games could be a way to add a revenue stream to the hospital. You can also expose many of the access to these resources to a phone, because a phone, is not like your father's phone or your grandfather's phone. The phones today have touch screens and little application engines in them, but they're virus immune. You can swipe them with disinfectant and in a much lower cost and more pervasive way deploy information and application access out in a hospital without the cost of a patient bedside terminal. You could do pretty well everything on here except watch the movies. Maybe that'll come soon too. Just on collaboration, I talked a little bit about high definition video. You could have a clinical application of what we call telepresence, where you need to engage a remote specialist. This can be done in a far more meaningful and powerful way than in the past. I used the example of telepsychiatry, all of the nonverbal discussion. Now, if we take that notion of a remote clinical visit and add biometric telemetry to it, we can come up with something that we call a health pod. So this is a device that takes telemedicine to the next level, where you can actually have a remote thing that looks like a photo booth and put a patient in there and have the patient either with a nurse or nurse practitioner or even on their own be guided by the physician on the other end to put on a blood pressure cuff, take their weight, blood pulse oximeter, point a high-resolution camera at a wound. A variety of primary care diagnostics can be delivered that way. And then once you've done that, you'll often provide a remedy in the form of a prescription. Well, here's the economics of a prescription in Canada. It takes 3 prescribing doctors to support 1 pharmacist. So you'll find a lot of small towns that have a doctor, but they don't have a pharmacy. So if you're older or it's bad weather and you've now got a prescription for a drug that you really should start taking right away, and the next thing you have to do is go 40 or 50K to the nearest town to buy it, that's another problem. And you're risking your life doing it in winter weather driving conditions. So here's a Canadian innovation called a PharmaTrust pharmaceutical dispensing kiosk. This looks like a bank machine, but it has a live video chat between a pharmacist and a patient. It can take the credentials of the patient, the payment scheme for the patient in on the front. The pharmacist can have a chat with the patient about the drug and how to use it, and they can then dispense that drug from inside the dual temperature zones that can support things like suspensions in one temperature zone versus regular pills in another temperature zone. You could actually rehydrate a dehydrated drug and shake it inside this machine and even count pills. This is an Oakville-based company. They've been securing patent white space on remote dispensing, and they, I think, could be an amazing complement to the health pod concept. So imagine, this is my own poor graphic merger here, but imagine if you had a health pod attached to a drug dispensing kiosk and then connected those systems, provisioning systems behind them, so that the electronic prescription could flow right into the kiosk's system. We're working on that. These are real things. The last shot, this is actually Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto, and anyone can go in there. That's the primary care unit at Sunnybrook. Anyone can go in there and have a prescription filled. It holds 250 drugs, which is a lot of drugs. Most prescribing docs have a short list, 20, 30, 40. Their favorite 10 antibiotics, their favorite 10 analgesics, their favorite 10 anti-inflammatories. If you're in a specialty like psychiatry, it's a bit different. But if this is in a psych ward, you'd put different drugs in it. Right? So there's a lot going on. Just a little on some of the futures that are happening. We're seeing hospitals now that are starting to deploy robotic surgery. There's been a number of telerobotic surgeries done in Canada. There have been some done between the U.S. and Canada. NASA was very interested in telerobotic surgery for long-term space missions, because as they take on lofty goals like going to Mars, what happens if someone gets sick? And you don't have to get very sick. Appendicitis will kill you if you don't treat it, and it's pretty common. So the old way they thought was, well, we'll put a surgeon on every space mission. What happens if the surgeon gets sick? Okay, so it's far better if you can work it from the ground somehow. So there are new hospitals starting to do this. There are a number of procedures that are done this way, a lot of sensitive procedures around the brain that are done in a way that combines 3D radiography, CT, MR, PET with scalpels. It's still under the control of a physician, but it applies bounds so that you can't go into that vital artery or you can't go into that vital part of the brain that you know doesn't have a problem. And then finally, last couple of slides, virtualized care through avatars is something that a lot of researchers are working on today. It seems like a strange notion. Would I really want to talk to a cartoon about my health? Depending on what you have, you might. That's what we're finding, is people who are uncomfortable talking about certain topics with a human don't mind talking to an avatar. And there's been a lot of research, sort of soft science research around this. In other words, the qualitative aspects of the caregiver shouldn't look too human, shouldn't look too cartoonish. You need to find the right balance, and you actually can get enhanced caregiving. Certainly across certain cultures or certain conditions, this can be better, measurably better than a human for certain things. And the access to this can be obviously wide as the coverage of a network. So there's been lots to think about today. Clinician adoption is key. I think that any of you that are working on projects here at the university, you're probably already thinking about that. I've seen it. I've seen so many failed projects in industry that have started with some computer or IT person who has a good idea, but they just haven't thought through the clinical adoption piece, and it fails. And there could be core property in there, core work that's very valuable. But until they get some clinical help to approach it properly in a clinical context, it may not get legs. Access versus privacy. These are interesting things, like notions of privacy versus security. They're opposing forces, so we have to think about that. Obviously, the aging population is going to drive a lot of us in health informatics for a long time. The oldest baby boomer was born in 1946, and you're looking at the youngest one. I was born at the last year of the last month, so I'm the tail end, the caboose of the baby boom. And so hopefully we'll have this all solved before I need it. Anyway, I think we've got a lot that we've covered today. That's how you can reach me if you want to send me an email, and I'm happy to take any questions that I can manage, or maybe we can manage as an audience now. But Shirley, you have a word?
No, well, the word is thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very enjoyable presentation. I have a lot of questions myself, but I'm sure that the audience does. I just want to make a couple of notes before we start, and one about the avatar. Do I get to design the avatar?
Sure.
Nice, tall, male.
Just like on Second Life.
And
everybody looks good on Second Life. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. So, but what it did recall was years and years ago, I remember this experiment called ELIZA. Does anybody else remember that? They should have predicted this, right? That the person was much more comfortable talking to a computer about personal questions and actually got thoroughly engaged with the whole process. So I probably described it very poorly, but that's my memory of the ELIZA project. And the other thing is that at Sunnybrook Hospital, I have experienced the pharmacy or dispensing process there. They give you a buzzer system so that you can go away for a coffee or lunch, because it can take a significant amount of time. So I can imagine this other capability would be very welcomed in a busy hospital environment. So I'll now invite the audience to have their questions asked and answered, hopefully. And if there's some from the web, we can take those as well. So who would like to start off with a question to Brantz? You have Dominic? Okay, you got a mic there?
Or certainly take the other one first.
Okay, we'll take one from the audience, and then Dominic Covey is on the West Coast, would like to ask a question.
Hi, Brantz. It's
Hi,
Dave Mosher from HP. The things you presented were very interesting, and a lot of them are real, or most of them are real. And I'm curious your opinion on Canadian healthcare seems slow to adopt new technologies. Do you think it's because, as IT professionals, sometimes we oversell the benefits and then they're disappointed, or is it more a question of funding, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I guess I'd have to challenge the question a bit. I'd say slower than who. And maybe you can answer that. So who are you comparing Canada with?
Let's say compared to Europe, as an example.
Well, I mean, to your point, Hewlett-Packard and Cisco worked on I would call it the world's leading hospital, which is St. Olaf's in Norway. And I think there are a couple of reasons. They have smaller systems to deal with, for one thing. I mean, it's more like dealing with a province here than a country. If you think about the size they have to deal with. So they have a little bit of a head start there. They don't have compared with the U.S., they don't have the litigation concerns that the U.S. market has. And in a way, I'll say that we have been leaders in some ways. Canada has been for telemedicine, as an example, I think done a great job, at least in some places. There's been some pretty interesting Aboriginal access projects in the north. Back to OTN, the telestroke program, which can intervene in the case of ischemic stroke. If you have an ischemic stroke, which is a clotting stroke, you can provide a powerful anticoagulant that not only stops the stroke, but it can actually reverse all the damage from the stroke if you get it to the patient within, I think, 90 minutes. But if you give that to someone with a hemorrhagic stroke, you'll kill them. So imagine that, bleeding stroke versus clotting. If you give someone with a bleeding stroke an anticoagulant, not a good thing. You have to make the right decision. So that means connecting a neurologist in typically the south with a patient and a nurse in the north. So these things have been going on for quite a while, and I think they are leading. But I agree. I think we have a great opportunity in Canada to do a whole lot more. Probably parts of it are funding based, parts of it are, there's always politics. We all know that, right? So if we can help mitigate some of the politics or get the politicians to align with each other and break some of these boundaries down, I think we can do a better job. But I think we're in a good place for it. It can be a lot better.
I think over lunch we were talking about the rate of adoption, and in general it's 15 or so years for some innovations to get actually into the healthcare system. So it's not speedy at the best of times. Shall we take one from the web? Martha, are you ready there?
Yes, I have several here. From Dominic, my question: how can we realize this type of promise given the absurdly low level of investment in ICT and its complementary factors, e.g., re-engineering, management of change, etc.? For example, in hospitals. What do you see as a strategy for rethinking the level and kinds of investment?
I'll give a couple of thoughts, and we touched on them. One is to separate the IT budget from the building budget. And what that means is the building needs to start providing a lot of what we consider IT things as fundamental master level resources in a hospital, I think. So, it's not so much that it's a shell game because you're moving from IT over to the building people, but really what the building people provide as fundamental resources needs to step up to this challenge. And in every case, as I said, every hospital needs a network, it needs some storage, it needs some wireless, it needs a protocol for security and availability and reliability, it needs physical building automation systems, it needs physical security systems. Those things used to be all lumped into the plant or the physical plant side facilities of a hospital, and they've surely been evolving toward IT-like protocols, now IP, Internet Protocol. Keep them over there, put them as the capital cost of building a project, and make them as part of the operational cost of keeping a hospital running. And then IT can then hopefully continue to attract the same funding they've gotten, but now they don't have to worry about the base infrastructure. They can focus more on the applications and clinical delivery and administrative delivery of applications, ideally with the same money, which now is focused on the clinical problems and not on just getting the network to work. So that's one approach. Another approach is if we use the basic math of trying to do some cost avoidance. We talked about this at lunch too, which is the difference between, one of the differences between the U.S. and the Canadian system is in the U.S. system, they love it when people come through the emergency door because it means they can bill. We don't like it when people come through the emergency door because it means we are going to have a cost. So, and we're in a good position here, I think, to start playing that economic model and argument around $15,000 per average hospitalization. And if we can move to avoiding hospitalization by reducing the amount of visits, by moving to wellness, moving to in-home resources, consumer health, we can get a healthier population. We already have longer lifespans than they have in the U.S., and we do it at a lower cost. So I think we can even deliver more by moving some of that cost out of the hospitalizations and into in-home services. Those are a couple of quick thoughts. Probably a lot more we can do there.
Is there a question from the audience here? All right, we'll take one from the audience. We'll sort of alternate here.
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation, and I have two questions out of curiosity. One is low-tech, another is high-tech.
Okay.
The telehealth service in Ontario is really great, and it has been proven, according to some studies, that visits to emergency rooms are half if the people have a chance to talk with the nurse, the registered nurse, because many times people go to emergency room out just in case. So if they consult somebody, they don't go. So now, considering the younger generation, they don't speak on the phone, they text. And they forced us, as a ripple effect, our parents also to start texting. I know most of my friends' children, they won't once answer the phone, but they answer the text message. Are there any plans to introduce chats and texting instead of phone service? That's the low-tech question.
Okay.
And the high-tech question is, what about quantum encryption as a security measure for health data transmission here in Canada?
Okay. So the first one, if I take some programs like the Telehealth Ontario, which is a phone-based service, they're looking at expanding their access and broadening the way that people interact with them. So they discovered that phone was a good way to put, a series of nursing professionals on the phone to mitigate having to drive to the emerge in the winter. It offloads the emerge. It's less costly than the emerge. And I think they're just going to continue to add different modes of operation. Like the modern call center that you can buy today is a multimodal call center. It can take emails in, it can parse them, it can get them to the right agent. It can then take in, can deal with things like web text. You can go to a website and push the call me button. And this is true in retail. I mean, if you wonder what fabric that sweater is, rather than not finding it on the website or phoning them, you can push the call me now button. So retail has established some of these consumer ideas a long time ago, like 10 years ago, where call centers have evolved, and I think that will make its way into health. Does that answer? Because I had a little trouble hearing you at the beginning. The second part around what encryption techniques are appropriate for health, is that effectively it? Or
About the quantum encryption, is it any plans implementing it in Canadian health?
Okay, so that's a policy and a regulatory compliance question more than anything. Security protocols that you can apply to a network today are extremely tight. If they're good enough for military and bank, they're good enough. But it comes down to, what does policy dictate? And the way that policy writers write it is they don't box themselves into technology. What a policy writer writes is that you have to apply an appropriate level of privacy protection to this patient. And an appropriate level is a moving target. So if something gets taken to court, the judge has to hear about what's out there and what did you have applied, and was what you applied the best you could do. And if it wasn't, then you look negligent. And so that's the way that the law interprets this. They never want to write in an ISO number, a number of bits of XOR encryption. They don't want to do that because it's a moving target. And the second that someone might find a flaw in a security model, that law then is invalid. But if they make it loose enough by saying an appropriate level, then they cover themselves. So policy and policy writers are very good at this stuff, and I think it's actually a good answer to the question. What we have to do is make sure that we, in delivery, either as a vendor or as a clinical provider, are keeping up with the state of privacy, security, and policy and regulatory requirements. So,
shall we take one from the web now?
I have a web. Do you see a change in the push for health informatics technology as new, younger, more tech-savvy healthcare professionals enter the workforce. What new challenges do you see with this change?
I think that it's good news, and I think that probably more importantly, the clinical professionals are coming in with more of an appetite for these tools, because health informatics people and IT people get it inherently, and we've all been, I think, in technology scratching our head around other industries. Why don't they get it? But finally, every industry seems to be getting it. I just bought a new car on the weekend, and the entire thing was done by email and web, including, finally, I had to sign something. So I got a PDF, I pulled it into Photoshop, I dragged my signature in and emailed it back to them. There's your signature, right? So we in technology are very comfortable with this. It's the clinical side, which ironically is also a technology business, but it hasn't been an information technology business, that is going to, I think, here's the challenge. I think they'll start pushing informatics people now, which is a good problem too. But I think we should get ready to stop trying to push rope in health informatics uphill and get ready for, hopefully, clinical pulling us with great ideas. And if we get pulled with great ideas, then their adoption is more likely to happen, and I think ultimately these things will bear a lot more fruit in the coming years. Then again, I'm a natural optimist, but that's what I think.
Any question from the audience? Oh, here's one.
Hi. Are you at all worried about an overdependence on technology? It's nice for everything to be networked and all, but if it's any other office or industry, I've visited clinics, pharmacies, they do stupid things and their computer network goes down, and I can see if it's this new futuristic style of hospital, if their computer network goes down, it's going to be catastrophic.
I absolutely agree, and we think about this a lot. And I'll just go back to business process for a second, just generally. Anyone that was in the business of sending bills out to anybody 30 years ago had rooms full of typewriters, and people sat down and they typed out invoices. And they went out the door, and people hopefully paid them. The typewriters are all gone. All the people that did that job are all gone, and it's all gone electronic. What happens now if the electronics break in that environment? Revenues will stop. I'm drawing a business analogy for a reason, because they've done this earlier than health has done it. And they had to do risk assessments of finding weak links. Find the part that if it breaks, the single point of dependency. And if that breaks, do we sync or not? Right? And they find them, they expose them, and they remedy them by putting alternate routes, alternate systems in. So just to technologies as a point in case here, case in point, the Internet protocol was developed as a military technology to start with. And it was designed, unlike the old phone system, to have multiple pathways. So that if a backhoe dug up a line, or if a bomb came in and blew up a route, there should be resilient pathways in a self-healing network. And that's effectively the way that these networks are built today. So really, I really appreciate the question, but it all comes down to, can it all break? Well, it'd be very difficult to break a whole, resilient, well-designed, medical-grade network. What I worry about more is basic things like power. Okay, so if power goes away, with this all, it doesn't matter how many redundant links you've got. If you don't have power, you have a problem. Okay, you got diesel. Well, guess what? The diesel that was used during the brownout of about, 4 years ago, many banks either ran out or just about ran out of diesel from their backup, standby systems. So what used to be, it'll never go down for more than 12 hours, so we have 24 hours of fuel. Well, they ran into 36 hours, or some people had enough fuel, or they were able to buy some. But the fuel starts to go away in a power outage because fuel is made by plants that are typically in your local area. They don't want to transport it too far. And these upgraders, that's what you say out west, these refineries are dependent on electric power too. So if the power goes away, eventually the fuel goes away. If the fuel goes away, the backup power goes away. So those are things that I worry about more than the network, because these networks are designed in such a resilient fashion that they're, nothing's 100%, but close enough. If we go back to, even before we had these systems in place, things could still break. Power was still a problem before too, Hopefully that's good enough.
This is not meant to be a plug, but we have been very interested in this whole area of risk management in health, and for those that have to implement e-health solutions. So we designed and offer a workshop series called the e-health risk management workshop series. And it starts off with a workshop that looks at the benefits of implementing a new e-health solution, as well as the risks involved, and balancing those so that you take care of both sides and maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. And that's followed with two other workshops that look at two critical parts of that, which is privacy and security. We have those coming up in October. Yes, question here?
You spoke a lot about mobility in the hospitals.
Mobility?
Yeah. And you talked about two technologies, the mobile device technology, which are the handhelds, and then the patient bedside terminal. Yeah. Of those, and Wi-Fi, and of those, what do you think the key enablers are going to be? Which ones are going to be prevalent?
I think all of them. I think there's more to come. So I don't think there's any one mobile answer here. In fact, I think the one that's coming on stream now is the multimodal portable phone that, as an example, the latest BlackBerries are also Wi-Fi devices. So you can be on, and this actually works. If we go in our office with a BlackBerry, it flips over to our in-building wireless LAN Wi-Fi system, and it becomes your desk phone, or it becomes your desk extension without having to do anything. It automatically smells the Cisco network. It says, oh, I have a Cisco phone number, and then boom, it becomes your desk phone. And if you're standing beside your desk, both will ring. And if I have a call on that, and I walk out of the building, it'll seamlessly pass me over to, in this case, to the Rogers network. We can seamlessly pass an enterprise IP voice system over to a publicly available carrier system without dropping the call, which is pretty amazing if you think about what's going on there. But it works. Now, that means that we're now using, right there, you're using a licensed carrier spectrum, and you're using an unlicensed enterprise spectrum with two different phone switches, effectively, on the back, and they can interoperate. If I want to then add a third radio to that, which would be my Bluetooth headset, which got that in the new car too, so that's kind of cool. It's like the best conference room is the car now because no one else is there, and the quality's good. So that the car then has another radio network called Bluetooth in it, and I think these things all need to interoperate. As ultra-wideband comes out, location-based services will get more granular. You'll be able to get down to sub-meter location of devices. We can do 3-meter on a good day with Wi-Fi today. So I think it's all good. They overlap. They have different value. Kind of like there's no one good way for humans to communicate. I mentioned how I like to use instant messaging as a complement to email and phone. I think all three are great, but there isn't one that wins. I think they're all better together than any one would be ever.
And then does the physical weight of the device come into play? Because
That's
I know
a great
for the
question. Some nurses have complained that our wireless IP phone is a little heavy on their scrubs. We have a partner that makes a little like Star Trek-like badge that works on our phone networks, and they hang that around their neck, and it's all voice-driven. So they can touch that and say, where's Dr. Fred? And they'll say, Dr. Fred's in the OR. And they'll say, okay, let me talk to Dr. Fred. And it's all voice-driven and very, very cool. And that doesn't drag your scrubs down. So by virtue of the great battery life and droppability we have with our portable device. We also add a little weight with that. Fortunately, there are a lot of when you're in a standards world, there are a lot of options. They either come from a variety of different companies. Other companies can provide innovation and be on these networks.
One last question from the web.
Okay. Which hospital that you can reference is the most digitally advanced hospital in the world? What process is available for planning the digital hospital of today? And what is your projection of savings that can be realized in a full digital hospital?
Well, I'll start by saying that a variety of IT suppliers out there, us, our friends from our big partners, have approaches to this problem. They'll have different names for it. They'll call it the digital hospital, they'll call it the smart healthcare facility, and they have not only the nice marketing slides, but we can point to real-world examples, which when people visit some of these hospitals, like the one I mentioned, St. Olaf's, when you go there, the great thing you hear is that the actual visit shines in comparison with the PowerPoint. We saw the slides, we heard about it, didn't really believe it. We went, it's even better because people are really using it. It really works, and it's weaving together all of these different implications of patient to caregiver to administration to building controls that can all participate together. Savings, these are fairly new. You can look at, I think a holistic study on savings is going to be fairly subjective today, but you can look at pieces of the puzzle. You can look at revenue streams and cost avoidance models around things like patient bedside terminals, energy reduction by smart building automation systems, which typically save with existing buildings with old chillers, heating and cooling systems. You can save about 20% of your heating and cooling bill just by having a smarter approach to managing heating and cooling. And then how many footsteps per nurse per shift do you save with things like location-based services? We can look at these, and we've typically broken it down that way, looked at them as individual things. I think there's an opportunity to holistically view this, and I don't have a study on that yet. There haven't been enough. Dave might have something to say.
IDC has one.
Who does?
IDC has one.
So apparently International Data Corporation, IDC, have done a study on this, which I obviously need to read. All right. Thanks.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I know that probably we all have other questions that we'd like to ask, but I invite the audience to meet with Brantz afterwards if you have any additional questions. And I just want to thank you once again. This is a small token of our appreciation, thank you for coming. And I welcome you to come back and visit us for our next seminar on Friday, October the 30th with Mr. Bill Tatham. I'm sure it will be an entertaining talk. He is very, very passionate, and he exudes it with every part of his body, so you'll really enjoy that talk as well. So have a great day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.